welcome to the very first video episode of the Infinite Life podcast. And you are getting the privilege today to be with myself, Katische Haberfield, and our very special guest, Tina Erwin. Tina, welcome to the podcast.
Katische, thank you so much for having me, and I'm deeply honored to be your first guest. It is absolutely thrilling.
Great. Well, I like to have and talk about and be with people who talk about the things that we don't talk about. So taboos and controversial topics, which everyone else finds controversial, but I don't necessarily, have always been my jam. So I was looking for a guest that would talk about something that people might want to know about, but wouldn't necessarily ask. And so I was in need of some information and assistance in my own business when I had a unusual occurrence of two spirits appearing in my house, which my cat Max, who you've just met a few minutes ago, Tina, and probably he will walk across the screen again later, came into my kitchen, and Max pointed them out. There's a little special spot, and I was like, I don't have time for this right now. I know you're here, and when I figure out what I do with you, I'll come back to you. And they were very kind and patient, and I just went onto the internet and you came up, and I was like, there you go. There's a lady who knows all about this. And that's how I found you. And so what happened, Tina, and I will let you introduce yourself in a second, is so my cat sat in this one spot and is like there and there. And I'm like, two at once? Like, we've never had any, but we've got two right now. And so I came and I sat back down like about 4 hours later. And I said to Max, this is the beauty of a live video cast, isn't it? The cat wants to be part of it. And if I lock him out, he will sit and meow for the whole episode. So he's just going to be a regular guest, I think, on the podcast. And the spirits just waited for me. And I sat down with my pendulum and connected to my higher self. And I said, I need to know, because usually if I feel energy in my house, it's one of my guides, it's my higher self, or it's one of my other incarnations. And this time I knew it wasn't. I was like, this is not any of the familiar energy. I'm like, who is it? And so I got them to spell out who they were, and I knew immediately who they were. And they were connected to two past life regressions I had just recently completed. And so it was beautiful to have them then come in and connect with me, but they wanted to move the final parts of their energy across. So we used the crossing prayer, which we'll talk to you about in length in this episode, and they were able to finish their crossing over procedure. And immediately the clients who live in America felt immediate relief. They felt really beautiful energy, and they were then able to actually connect to that particular person as a guide for them. So previously their energy wasn't available to them at all. As soon as we activated the past life regression, they had insights into their life in that incarnation. We crossed them over fully because they'd received trauma, and then they were available as a healing energy and as a guide for that person. So thank you for your website.
You're very welcome.
So I'll let you tell everyone about you.
Well, thank you very much for that. I have had an amazing life, and part of that life, I was in the United States Navy for 20 years. I retired as a naval commander, and my specialty, among many things, was I was a terrorist expert for the submarine force, and I designed equipment that protected submarines from terrorist attack. So I understand how terrorism works. Terrorism can work in any dimension. And whether it's you're terrorized in the sleep state, when someone is causing you to feel unsafe in your home or your body or on the street, it is terrorism. If a child says, "Mommy, I am terrified," or a person wakes up and they have terrifying, paralytic dreams, something's happening. And so I I've always had some level of psychic ability, and no, I did not use it for the Navy, other than my crew did not know that I could tell what was going on when they walked toward me. It's not something you necessarily want to share because it freaks them out. But my opportunity was to learn how an awful lot of things worked, which I did. I was never able to serve aboard a submarine because during those years that was not allowed. That has since recently been allowed. And during the time I was in the Navy, I studied everything I could get my hands on regarding metaphysics. And I saw the parallels between ordinary physics and good and bad in a mortal world, and the good and bad in the fourth dimension, and the what we would call the ether, or the fourth dimension. And so as I'm studying all of these things, and yes, I have psychic ability, but if you don't constantly push yourself to learn how to use the ability, and I don't ever call it a gift. It's not a word I would ever use, because if you have this ability, it's a responsibility. I can return a gift. I can re-gift it. But once you have this, the higher realms expect you to do something with it that is positive, that doesn't violate spiritual or karmic law, and is of service to humanity. It sounds like an awful lot. I don't mean to be doing a dissertation here, but that is my frame of reference. How do we help humanity? And one of the things I discovered, or I kind of stumbled on, was that people who died have no idea what to do when death comes, especially if the death is traumatic. Especially, I had a client 2 days ago whose girlfriend at the age of 33 dropped dead of a heart attack. And she didn't understand what happened to her. And so her friend contacted me and said, she's driving me crazy. She keeps trying to talk to me. I can feel her. And I know I can just say the prayer, but I want to say goodbye. I want her to understand what happened to her. And they had a conversation, and then I crossed her over. And my point was, once done is done. Once this person crosses from the fourth dimension to the fifth, then there's no coming back from that. That means that that person is now within the realms of the higher realms. They get to ask questions. They get healing. I had a client once with a person who had been in a wheelchair all their lives. Well, they died and they didn't know they weren't still in a wheelchair. And so that opportunity to cross them over, and they could stand up, cross the light bridge to the heaven world, and the joy, the rapture of knowing they were physically, emotionally, spiritually free to embrace happiness and without limitation was tremendous. And I learned how to cross people over many years ago, and that was a particularly long story. But that wasn't enough. I realized that I couldn't always be available to everybody who needed to have somebody crossed over. And I broke my iPhone, and I dropped it, and it was in an OtterBox, and it still broke. So I went to the Apple store to get it repaired, but I was early for my appointment, walked across the mall to a very, very, very expensive handbag store. And the people there were charming and very helpful. And I said, I just wrote this book, Ghost Stories from the Ghost Point of View. This is this book. And they said, oh my gosh. And I had a card with me that explained that. They said, this store is so haunted. Oh my gosh, we see racks move, and we see things fall down, and we feel like someone's watching us. It's horrible. Can you remove them? So I said, sure. I remote viewed the back of the store, removed them. That was good. They called me the next day, and they said, we have more. And I said, all right, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to write a prayer, and I'm going to ask the ladies in this super high-end store to beta test it, because that's what you do in science. You experiment with what works and you beta test it. And this prayer became the bridge between the third and the fourth dimension, so that the living can help the dead. And she experimented with it. Well, her husband is a resident in a hospital, and he would come home with all these dead people. She would say the prayer every night that he came home as an experiment, and they weren't irritable with each other at supper anymore. And it lifted something from him. And then, I started sharing it everywhere I could possibly share it. So that's a little bit about me, what I do and how I help people. And I have written 8 books. I'm an author, including the Crossing Over Prayer book. So that's what I do.
Okay, great, perfect. So many questions. Let me see where the heck to start with the questions. Let me ask you, as a small child, did you have your clairvoyance active?
I could see the Deviant Kingdom, meaning the pixie sprites and elves.
Okay.
As a child, I still remember clearly seeing them playing in the forest or being outside. And I had a imaginary friend named Sarah. I still remember her. And she was a ghost that was attached to the house we lived in when I was 3 or 4. But when we moved, Sarah didn't come too. My mother never noticed that. She just, it's like, that imaginary friend didn't come to the new house. So yes, and I could sense things and I could feel things, but like all psychic children, you think everyone can do that. And so you don't think it's unusual. I had a Siamese cat when I was 8, and she was my best friend. And talk about adoring your cat. That would be an understatement. And she was hit by a car and she died. And for weeks, I could see her ghost. She didn't understand she died, even an animal. And I do have the Crossing Over Prayer book, which includes prayers to cross over your animals, to give your animals that sense, because I long remembered that this beautiful creature, this gorgeous Siamese with these electric blue eyes, I still love her so much, didn't understand that she died, and she didn't understand why I wasn't picking her up anymore. My mother thought I was imagining it. I could see her ghost. So yes, I had some of those abilities, but it wasn't until I got married that the abilities just exploded.
Okay. I've got a couple of things that I'll circle back to there. But just quickly, because we haven't covered it in an episode yet, and we may have to have several chats with you, but children who see imaginary friends. Now, as you said, a lot of parents just think it's a developmental issue. The child is lonely. They're not adjusting well, and we know that that's not the case. So, how do you explain to people that have never thought about the fact that imaginary friend is real? How do you explain to them how to consider this?
I have many, many parents of psychic children as clients. And I personally refuse to work with the child. I will only work with the parent, because my job is to empower the parent to do that job so that they never lose the respect of their child. That's very, very important to me. Never, ever hand your child over to a psychic. You are responsible. What I tell them is, has your child ever lied to you? Well, no. Well, they're not lying now. They're telling you exactly what they see. They're telling you what they're feeling. It's real to them. And I've seen this with 3 of my granddaughters, three times, 3 granddaughters see things. My 10-month-old grandson had a ghost in his room 3 weeks ago. And my son said, there's somebody here because Jack is screaming. And I found her. She had come home with my granddaughter, who is 9. And she took delight in sticking pins in Jack, making him scream. I crossed her over. She didn't know she was dead. And fortunately, my son and my daughter-in-law, thank you, Lord, both of them with children, both families are very, very aware of this. What I say to parents is, your child isn't lying to you. When you're born, there is a thinness in the veil that separates your ability to see through dimensions. Some children lose that ability as they become older. Some children, it stays with them all of their life. And if you can learn the concept of spiritual service to others, you can give your children the acknowledgement that what they see is real. And then the most important thing of all is you can teach your children how to cross over these dead souls. I had a mother of twin 4-year-old boys. who were super psychic. And children have a tendency to lose respect for their parents if their parents just keep pushing them away or denying it. And it causes this barrier between the parent and the child. Never let that happen. And with this mom, the minister at the church said, your children are evil. And the mom was horrified. And I said, your children are not evil, they're just psychic. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, you have an opportunity to perform spiritual service regardless of someone's faith. When you perform this, you don't care what church they do or don't go to. You don't care if they're an atheist. And you don't care if they're a murderer, because her boys saw murderers and they were terrifying to these children. Here is this tool. It's called the crossing over prayer. And when you use this tool, you can have it written on your phone. I've got YouTube videos. Put that video on your phone and hit the play button. You don't even have to have it out loud. And play it over and over, or have your boys memorize it and teach your husband, bring your husband along. I'm always willing to talk to the husbands. And watch what happens. Your children sleep at night. You sleep at night. Your children you have gained the respect of your children. You can't buy that. You have to earn it. You've taught your children the value of service to others, and you've enabled them to grow spiritually more than they might have ever grown. And you're not putting your child on drugs. Did that answer the question?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you. I was curious about imaginary friends, and I did have a conversation with my mother the other day at dinner, just to ask her if I had any imaginary friends, or my sister had any imaginary friends, because as far as I could remember, we know as we get older, our memories of our childhood become a little bit more distorted. I couldn't remember having any imaginary friends, and she said, no, definitely not. You didn't have any imaginary friends. I was like, okay, that's a shame. I was like, oh, well, never mind. Because I never was frightened of the concept of people with having imaginary friends. I never thought it was strange. So it's always good to hear different perspectives. What I'm curious to know about is, when you say that some people don't know that they've died, so when we typically, stereotypically have somebody die in our life, or we, witness somebody dying, hospital, accident, a war, or whatever it is, we just assume they die and they know they're dead, right? That's just what we're taught. Everyone dies, and then depending upon your spiritual and religious beliefs, whatever happens afterwards. But for the most, I would think 99% of us think everyone dies, and that's that you're dead. And but then for some unknown reason, we might suddenly become aware of ghosts, but we usually associate ghosts with haunted houses and cemeteries and, after dark haunted house tours and stuff like that. So tell me a little bit about why, in your experience, you understand that there is this disassociation where some people, when they die, don't know that they've died. Why does that happen?
Because when death is sudden, unexpected, out of nowhere, a natural catastrophe, a murder, a car accident, you die in childbirth, you're on the battlefield. There are legions of stories of people, of men who died on the battlefield, and they just kept right on fighting, and their buddies saw them, but they later found that they couldn't have done that because their bodies were over there. I mean, there's so many stories of this, especially in Europe. I think even in the American Civil War, there are those stories as well. And the shock to the soul is so great. When you hear of a sudden death, what's the first thing you go, no, that can't be? It's denial. Mm-hmm. It's denial for the person who died as well. Mm-hmm. And we just moved to Washington State from San Diego, and one of my neighbors found out what I did, and he was very concerned about a nephew who was on a swing, fell off the swing, hit his head, and drowned. Well, he was so concerned. He just felt like this child hadn't crossed over. And I said, where did he die? So I was able to go back, find him, and he's still swinging. He has no idea. He's been dead for 5 years.
Oh, goodness.
And like the little girl who was harassing my grandson, she just said, "Why doesn't mommy talk to me anymore?
Oh,
Why? Mommy just sits and cries. Why doesn't mommy love me anymore?" And that suddenness means that the soul is knocked out of the body. And that's what happens when someone's in a car accident and they're in a coma. Because I had another case, which are all in these 3 ghost books, ghost story books. This girl was in a coma and she was in a horrible accident. And she remembers the accident, and the next thing she's standing by the side of the road. And she doesn't understand what happened to her. And so I was able to make the connection. And she said, "Well, if you can see me and you brought in an angel, does that mean I'm dead?" And I said, "No, it doesn't mean you're dead, but you're not living as you think of it. You're in a coma." And she said, "Well, tell me what to do, because I see that bright light and it would be so easy to go. Tell me what to do." And I said, "That's not my job. My job is to locate you, provide an angel for comfort, but it's beyond my pay grade. I'm not allowed to tell you what to do. My job is to locate you, let you know that you are in a coma, that your body is in this hospital, and now you must choose to live or die. The angel will provide you comfort, but I cannot tell you what to do."
okay.
Within 24 hours, she woke up.
Wow.
And she had a really rough road back. And she will probably have had no memory of it, what happened.
So
And
you can hear them talk as well as see them.
I can, yes.
Yeah. So you're clairaudient and clairvoyant.
Yes.
Yep. And do you think that's the case with a lot of people that are in comas then in hospitals, that, you know, they're in the similar sort of situation then?
I absolutely do. They don't know what happened to them and they can't find their way back. I mean, if you think about it, the soul lives forever and the soul can be separated from the body. If you think about what happens, did you ever have a situation where you woke up and you felt like you were out of sorts, you weren't yourself? Well, so many times the soul travels during the night for all of these experiences in the dream state. When you come back into your body, you settle back in. But I keep thinking of the childhood story, Peter Pan. It's like you're not fully back in your body. Your body, you haven't fit into all the nooks and crannies of who you are, and you're out of sorts, or a child wakes up, quote, on the wrong side of the bed. Well, let's say that you're asleep and a catastrophe comes and you're traveling and your body's moved to a hospital. You have no body to come back to. This happened to a child. We don't know what year she died, but the client said, "This child is driving me crazy. She's with me 24 hours a day. She wants me to be her mommy. She can't find her mommy." And so when we connected and we talked to the child, she said, "We were in the car and when I see her, because when I saw her, she was still in the clothes she died in, and she was in pajamas. And what we were able to piece together was she was in a horrible car accident and she died. And so she was asleep. She didn't understand she was dead.
Right.
She just couldn't. Okay. And so if you look at it from a purely physics viewpoint, and that's why I am always trying to open people up to the physics of metaphysics, meta meaning beyond what you think you know about physics. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. So the physics and the energy that defines you is eternal. It is everlasting. The ability to understand the theme and variation that happens with a mortal body and a human soul is just astonishing in its complexity.
Mm.
So let me stop for a minute. How am I doing?
No, you're doing good. Sorry, as I said, I have lots of questions. I'll just let you know that one of my favorite things. People, I am strange, so that's okay. I love people who get my strangeness. When my children were little, I used to love because they've always, until recently, slept in the same bedroom, and they're close in age, and they always wanted to be together at nighttime. And my favorite thing in the world was to sit in the room beside them at wake up time, so time to go to kindy or school, and watch the process of them re-entering their bodies to wake up for the day. Because I was like, before I even got into my whole spiritual development, I was like, these kids are traveling at nighttime, because I can see the energy come into their bodies as they wake up in the morning. They sleep so deeply, and I can actually see the physical jolt as they come into the world in the morning. And I loved it. I would always say to them, "Welcome back to Earth." Strange mum. They're like, "What?" But they take a long time to orientate in the morning. They're like, I'm like, oh, good travels last night. I mean, I don't say that now because they're teenagers, and anything that I have an opinion on, they're going to be the opposite of right now, because that's what teenagers do. But I definitely understand what you're talking about there, because I was like, yep.
Well, you're the first person I've ever known who could see it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that this happened to me. These different sets of abilities for me have been growing very stronger as I get older. But being able to be present at the exact moment that my father died, when he died, and seeing the energy leave his body, I think was the first part for me. To be able to physically watch somebody die from right at the point of death, and to like, my father was dying of terminal prostate cancer, and he was on a bed we had palliative care at home, and he was in our lounge room, and we were doing the daily wash, because he was out in a coma, and to be able to feel, I had read, like, here's kind of the geek that I am, I had read Sogyal Rinpoche's book about the dying process. I'm like, my father's dying, and I'm there sitting reading the Buddhist texts about the dying process. So I'm like, right, okay, this is happening, Mum, and then, and I had memorized it, and it was like, okay, here we go, we're going, and I'm like, Mum, and then to the doctor, it's happening, and they're like, no, it's not. I'm like, yes, it is. And then I was like, look now, and then gone. And I watched the breath go and out of his body, and he cried as he died, as he didn't want to go. He had a single tear run down his face, and that, I think, when you're able to physically see the death process happen, to be able to witness that, it's like, it just changes your perspective on everything, because you're like, all right, I get it now. I remember my dad saying to me when I was a little girl, when my nana died, come with me to the wake. I want you to understand that Nana's not there anymore, and that you're not your body. Which is a weird thing for my dad to say back then, because he's the most unspiritual, unreligious person you've ever seen. He used to drop me off at church and then come back an hour later. That kind of really anti-religion. But he wanted me to have a good grounding, so he'd drop me off at Sunday school and then pick me up later. And for him to say that, I remember thinking at the time, I don't want to go see a dead body. What are you talking about? I'll just remember Nana as she was. And then I was like, when the moment he died, I was like, you wanted to teach me so much that you had to show me yourself. I'm sorry you had to show me yourself. I'm truly sorry you had to show me yourself, but thank you. I thank you so much. It makes me feel very emotional thinking about it. But you know what I mean? Like, that's the feeling I got, was that he needed to tell me so much about this so that I could advance further, that he showed me. And it was no mistake that I was the one directing the scene there, and that everybody was able to be part of that as he left. So
that's a really big deal. And by the way, my copy of the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying is so marked up. I used to sleep with it so that I could absorb as much of it as I possibly could, and then have it live within me so I could practice that. And as much as I could. So I have deep and abiding respect for Sogyal Rinpoche. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
And having the experiences of helping someone through a dying process is very hard work. And it is so meaningful and so powerful. It reminds us of our humanity, and it's to be embraced, not denied. I helped my brother in 2017 when he passed away, and I watched as the monitors stopped, and I had him ready, which is something else I can offer perhaps at a different time. How, if you know someone's dying, what can you do for them before they die? There's a whole procedure, which is awesome, to be able to set them up so that your helpfulness is even more powerful later on. And I had him set up, and on my website, I have a video where I talk about what happens, because he asked me, what's going to happen when I die? And so I talked about that at his memorial.
It is very powerful. I actually, for me, I spent, it took me a year of full-blown grief, the normal grieving process. But then I spent 3 years studying death as a way of expressing my grief. So I wrote was it 50 or 80,000 word manuscript about his death, which has never been published because of family dynamics, but that's fine. And I set up a whole website with everything that I thought people needed to know about the dying process, about terminal illness, about the things that they could do. I mean, I was so adamant that there was something that I needed to do in this area, which is interesting about now the linkages now back to right now here, you and me talking, was I went and volunteered for the Karuna Hospice, who was the hospice, the Buddhist hospice that looked after my father in our house. I went on this deep investigation, but and then I photographed my grandfather's funeral. It was a really intense period of 3 years for me, and then I was like, the energy has stopped. I'm not supposed to work on this anymore. Like, all the doors shut. The book didn't get published. Family dynamics, grief stuff, everything. It was like, whoosh, stop. And then fast forward, it's 7 years, so it's 6 years or 5 years. So he's been gone about 8 or 9 years now. It's quite intense for me, because in a 10-year period, I've been divorced 10 years. In that period, one of my friends became locked in, and my father died. So I had 3 losses. My friend didn't die, but it was like 3 majorly traumatic things in a 12-month period that sort of really catapulted the change in my life. And I was like, there's something else that I'm supposed to do with death, but the universe doesn't want me to do it right now. I need to move past the energy of grief, and then what I'm supposed to do will come through later. And so it's been very interesting for me that I've now gone into helping people understand the infinite nature of life, and the fact that our energy never stops, that we move through different incarnations, and then the piece now with knowing through your crossing over prayer about the fact that you can help people cross over. Because to me, it's like, aha, here's the missing piece of my knowledge that I needed to access to help move all this information through and be part of a complete process. So from a personal perspective, it's just been a very interesting journey to see all the components of the understanding of death and the understanding of the soul move forward. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
What I wanted to ask you was, maybe now's a good time for you to, I think you have your book there, tell us a story from one of your books, so that we've covered quite a lot in the short amount of time that we've been talking. Maybe we just need a little bit of space now to absorb in our mind, because as a sound healer, I know you input all the sound, then your body needs to stop and process and absorb. So I think my brain now needs to just stop for a second and let us take the seat of listening to one of your stories that you've written in your book so that we can really take it to the next level. We've got the intellectual side of the understanding of what we've been talking about. Now give us an example that's in a storytelling format so that we can really take it to the next level.
Okay, is it all right if I read it?
Absolutely, please do.
Okay. It's from Ghost Stories from the Ghost's Point of View, Volume 1 out of 3 volumes. And the story is called Her Punishment. So many times death does not bring relief, release, or reflection. Often death brings an almost murderous rage to the soul who now finds that he or she has trapped themselves in a hell of their own making. The unsettling facet to this rage is that it can echo out into our dimension, into our own mortal reality with chilling consequences. The energy of this anger is what creates the paranormal anomalies that incite fear and even the most courageous of us. This case takes us into the realm of that tragic, angry place, that place where you have to truly listen before you can help someone. Peace can only come after the person can share his or her story. The frantic call. Late one afternoon, I received a frantic call from a close friend. She was at home with her husband, their son, and their housekeeper, and she begged me to come over immediately. When I inquired as to what was wrong, she said that someone or something utterly unknown was haunting their house, and I had to come over and fix it right now. Wow, okay, I'll be right over, I told her. Funny how sometimes fear can make you feel cold, like you're shivering with cold, but it isn't cold. It's fear. Cold fear, even on a very hot day. The scene I encountered when I let myself in through the open front door was that chill in the air of the family's overwhelming terror. I was a bit astonished to find all 4 of them huddled in a corner of the living room, watching the center of the room. These are highly educated people, and while they do believe in ghosts, they never expected to actually have one in their home. It's one thing to realize your home may be suddenly haunted. It is much more unnerving to witness this ghost or ghosts tossing small objects through the air like CD cases or moving paintings. This family even felt this ghost whooshing past them with such intensity that they could feel some semblance of a ghost body brush against their bodies. It goes beyond having the hair stand up all over you. The chilling facet of facing a real paranormal nightmare in broad daylight invokes a profound feeling of helplessness and dread, and they all felt it. They all knew they were not collectively crazy. They told me that within the last couple of days, they had each begun to sense that someone was there, but it wasn't too bad. What often happens is that when one person senses a ghost, so does another family member, but neither of them mentions it to anyone else. Each person tries to dismiss it as just an anomaly, something that will pass in time or just go away. But when it doesn't pass or go away, you come face to face with the fact that there's something going on, and that is exactly what happened. I asked them when they began to notice something. For each person, it was a bit different. For the parents and the housekeeper, it was just a little something out of the corner of their eye, a sense of unease, a feeling that someone was there. But then each person wasn't quite sure of it. The vagueness of it allowed them to ignore this entire situation until their son arrived. Once their son Sean came over to spend the evening, everything escalated. This was when they could feel the ghost or ghosts rushing past each of them. However, their son seemed to be the focus of all of this heightened psychic activity. The poor guy had no idea why. He just drove over to visit his parents and have a nice evening with them all. He looked at me in a bewildered way and shrugged his shoulders. He was just as puzzled as the rest of them, standing there, terrified of the unknown, the unseen, but definitely present something. By the time I actually arrived at the house, they were now all experiencing ghostly phenomena. The more they described what had been happening, the more I felt like someone on the other side was trying to get their attention. I could feel the energy of whoever was there, but I knew I needed to begin working quickly. A mountain of murderous rage. I was sitting in the living room by myself. Normally, I don't go to the person's house to remove a ghost. I remote view the house. But since they were so close and they desperately wanted my presence in the house, I agreed to come over. As I began to work, the rest of the family was watching from the hallway. I'm not sure what they thought was going to happen, but I guess they wanted to keep a safe distance away from what must surely have felt like a mini maelstrom. As I looked around, which is a form of remote viewing, and got a sense of things, I immediately noticed two elderly people who had followed the husband home from his medical practice. They were pretty benign, and I was able to quickly move them on. The third ghost, however, caught me completely by surprise. He body slammed me and then grabbed me by my throat. And he grabbed me so hard, with such dynamic, terrifying force, that I could feel his hands on my throat beginning to crush my windpipe. When you can't breathe, panic immediately begins to set in, and all you want to do is get this person's hands off of your throat so that you can feel fresh air fill your lungs. I completely forgot that my purpose was to try to reason with what is obviously a murderous ghost, but he just wouldn't let go of me. I had my own hands on my throat trying to get him to release me as I was struggling to breathe. The dad was watching me gasp for breath with my hands on my throat. Since he is a physician, he ran for his kit. I realized, as I could hear him screaming at me, that he was preparing to do a tracheotomy right then and there.
Oh,
Now I'm really shoving fear into blind panic into high gear. I didn't want to die that day myself, but I surely didn't want to have this doctor cut my throat open either. Finally, I got a grip on my own emotions and began to talk to this teenage ghost. "Who are you?" I asked in as calm a voice as I could muster under these dire circumstances. I have never had a ghost scream at me until this event, but scream he did. "Why do you care? No one cares. There's only hate in the world. I'm angry, and I don't know who you think you are or why you're here, but if you think you can dispatch me as quickly as you did those old people, you're dead wrong. I'm not going anywhere." I can feel my friend moving toward me with his scalpel, and I realized that I had to take my power back from this vicious ghost and get him to stop. So I yelled at him with the demanding power in my voice. "Tell me your name right now and take your hands off me immediately. You're killing me," I demanded. Amazingly, that startled him enough that he instantly released me. Blessedly, I could feel his cold, icy hands release my throat and feel the reassuring sensation of life-giving air rush back into my lungs. The wide-eyed doctor put his medical things away when I gave him the signal that I could breathe again. Everyone seemed to give a collective sigh of relief. Brian's sad story. My name is Brian Schmidt. Brian Schmidt, the same Brian Schmidt who committed suicide about a year ago? Yes, I am. What made my conversation with him so amazing was that I was talking to him out loud in this room. The family could hear my side of the conversation. Once I took charge of the situation, incredibly, he began to calm down. I then asked him to tell me what happened that caused him to kill himself. "I hate my mom. She was divorcing my dad, and it was all her fault. She was the cause of everything. My dad didn't want the divorce, but she went through with it anyway. I watched my dad feel so destroyed, and she was to blame. What a bitch." "Brian, how old were you?" "I'm 17. He answered me flatly, almost emotionless, as if he did not realize until that moment that he had thrown away the rest of his life. The longer I questioned him, the more he seemed to be replacing his rage with profound despair. In a gentle but firm voice, I asked him to tell me what happened on the day he died. The divorce was becoming final. I had been on the computer that evening, and she came into my room and began screaming at me to get off of it, bitching and moaning that I was on some bad site. I screamed back at her, and we had a huge fight. I hated her so much at that moment. Then she had to go out of the house to deal with some other divorce thing. She finally left me alone. How long had you planned to kill yourself? When did that thought come to you? There's no judgment here. We all simply want to understand what happened inside of you. Although his response was disturbing, chilling to me, to my core, he told me the story dispassionately, almost as if he were telling me what he saw someone else do. He seemed disconnected from it all, but gradually elements of the tragedy of his experience began to seep into the feeling of his words. At that moment, I remember feeling rage, a rage that I guess just exploded, and I wanted to punish her for destroying our family. Right after that, she left the house. I was so angry, I wanted her to feel the pain I was feeling, so I decided to kill myself right then. I knew that she would be back pretty soon. Dad wasn't allowed to come to the house, but it was his house too. But she wouldn't let him come here. I planned it so she would be the one to find me. I decided to hang myself in my bedroom. I knew she would come into my room when she got home, so I hung myself from the ceiling fan. I wanted her to see my body. I wanted her to feel the horror of seeing my lifeless body. That was the only way I could make her understand how mad I was at her. I took a deep breath and began to digest what this poor kid had just said. I knew that I had to help him to understand his entire situation. Once you hung yourself, son, do you remember leaving your body? Yeah, hanging yourself is a horrible way to die. I continued on. Once you left your body, did you watch your mom come in and find you? Yeah, I watched. I didn't expect her to call my dad, though. She called him and forced him to come over and see my body. I forgot how bad my dad would feel when he realized I was dead. I had no idea he would see me hanging there. I didn't mean for that to happen, but it was all her fault. I watched him cry. She screamed for a while and then she called 911. I watched them cut me down from the fan and take my body away. I thought I'd feel better dead, but I don't feel any better dead than when I was alive. I thought killing myself would take my rage away. Death doesn't take away the anger and the pain. I'm still furious. Son, I have to ask you, what is your connection to your friend Sean here? Oh, well, we went to different schools, but we knew each other because our families were friends until my mother ruined everything. I knew his parents were divorced too, but that his dad had remarried. I followed him one day and just hung around watching this crap that was happening to his family. Why do parents fight so much when kids are at school, in high school? I don't know, I said. It's what happens, I guess. Tell me, what was it about today that caused everything to accelerate for you, to make such an effort to get everyone's attention? I came to try to get him to understand that even though your parents divorced, killing yourself is not the answer. Oh my God, did you think that Sean was thinking along the same lines? Did you think Sean was planning on killing himself? This was truly a rare situation where I could have a conversation with the ghost out loud. I relayed what Brian was saying so that the family could know what was going on between both Brian and I. Sean is over in the corner shaking his head and telling his family he was not thinking of killing himself. His dad is staring at him in horror. He takes his dad aside to reassure him he was not thinking about suicide. Well, I don't know for sure. And I didn't know for sure, and I wanted to tell him, but he couldn't hear me, and I felt this rage come up again. I knew he was mad at his parents. I guess killing yourself doesn't really solve anything, does it? I could sense that Brian was beginning to allow remorse to enter his heart, and he was feeling the profound tragedy of it all. However, I couldn't understand why he attacked me. I have to understand why you came at me so violently when I only came here to try to help you. What were you thinking when you saw me? I was angry. You look like you were going to try to stop me from convincing Sean over there not to kill himself. Well, Sean had no idea what you were trying to do. You terrified him with your swooping around and making things fly through the house. Now he knows exactly what you were feeling and that you genuinely wanted to help him. Here again, I was glad that I could share this entire conversation. Well, I guess you're right. It sucks to be a ghost. No one hears me. The only way I can get anyone's attention is to move stuff around, and that takes a lot of energy. But then I have lots of energy. Rage gives you energy for a while, and then it just makes you sad inside. I sensed that Brian's rage had begun to dissipate, and that it was finally time to help him cross over. An angel offered his hand, and Brian seemed reluctant to take the bright, welcoming hand that was extended to him. It's all right to take the angel's hand. It's time to cross over and begin to heal. He shook his head and looked like he wanted to cry, but he was fierce in his refusal to give in to tears. It's all right to let go, son. The angel will take you to a place where your broken heart can heal. You'll feel better soon. Do you see the light that's coming for you? Breathe it in. It's all right. You're safe now. Crossing over will help your whole family to heal. He looked at me with tragedy in his eyes and reluctantly took the angel's hand, and then he was gone. I opened my eyes and asked everyone if they were all right. The three of them stared at me with shock on their faces. They each said this was an incredible experience, and they were so glad that they could participate in helping him cross over by asking for help. I know that they joined me in my astonishment at this young man's towering rage. I assured them that their request for help is tremendous for Brian and that service to him will echo out for a long time. The epilogue. When a person who commits suicide finally crosses over, it greatly enables the living family to heal. It is a subtle yet significant difference. Eventually, I felt that Brian was truly sorry for his extreme decision to end his life. It was my prayer for him that he received help in the heaven world to heal all those aching places in his heart. I also sent prayers to his family to facilitate healing for all of them. My friends called me later and said their house was psychically quiet now. Nothing else is flying around. No one was whooshing past them and they were alone in their house. They also said that they realized how important it is to work out an agreement between former spouses to remain civil at all times for everyone's sake. The reality is that an astonishing number of parents tend to divorce each other when their children are in high school. This is the time in a teenager's life when boys and girls need their parents the most. Yet parents become completely overwhelmed by their own sense of hurt and betrayal and become blind to the catastrophic reaction their behavior is having on their children. Tragically, divorce is love betrayed for children of any age, and its emotional consequences echo out for the rest of everyone's lives. The end of the story.
Wow. So that made me cry.
Maybe it was moving enough.
Wow. So, okay, I'm sure that people will need a little bit of time to reflect on that.
Let me add one more thing. That young man, Sean, had 7 friends commit suicide in 1 year.
Wow.
And I actually had to work with him as a grief counselor to help him overcome that staggering level of grief as each person in turn, as each precious teenager took their own life. And so it's a reality right now. And maybe that story might be of some service to others.
Yeah, that's a tremendous thing to have to deal with. To have 7 of your friends commit suicide, and speaks of a very interesting soul contract.
It does, and this is a good kid. I mean, he's a very fine person, and he didn't understand what was happening, and he was really close to his dad. He was super close to his dad's 4th wife, who, yeah, you know, when they got married, I was there, and they said, I do. I mean, it was, and all of his ex-wives came to the 4th wedding because the 4th wife was such a peacemaker for all of the parties.
Okay.
It was a beautiful moment.
Wow. Interesting. Now, why do you think that? So luckily for me, so far, the 2 spirits that I've had in my house were not angry at all. They were very, very calm. But why do you think that some people have experiences with spirits that are in ghost form that are angry, and then other people like will never have that experience?
Well, you have to remember, as many personalities as there are in living mortal bodies, there are an equal number of completely unique personalities as ghosts. I have a gamut from murderers to saints. Because God gives us the opportunity for experience. And some personalities are so difficult. I've got a story about a mother who decided to haunt her daughter. She haunted her daughter for 10 years.
That's nasty.
And the things she did to her daughter were so cruel. It was jaw-dropping. She had my phone number for 1 entire year. And every time she went to pick up the phone to call me, that mothering ghost would stop her. And finally, one day she'd had enough. And in that quickly, her mother was crossed over. And she had her first night's sleep in 10 years. I mean, that is just astounding. I've had other ghosts who were so dedicated to service, they knew they were dead, but they stayed behind to help the souls who weren't dead. And several of those stories. And sometimes objects are haunted because the object has the energy and the ghost doesn't want to let go of the object. I mean, think about it. All antique stores are haunted.
I watched your video on antique jewelry the other day, and I tell you, I ran out and cleansed all my jewelry. I was like, because, so I've gone all red. You can see I've gone all red. I have a few pieces of antique jewelry, and I actually got rid of a whole lot. And I was like, because I use the crystal singing bowls, I was right, quick, and I went through each and every single piece of jewelry, and it went in the singing bowl, and I played the bowl to release this way, to release the energy, and said a prayer. And I was like, okay, spirit guide, is this clear now? Yes. I was like, oh. And then I was checking all the antique items that I bought from the shops. You know, is that, you know, is this one? How about this painting? And I was like, no, that's fine. Because I play singing bowls in the rooms where I've got the antiques, a lot of it's fine because the energy has been cleansed so many times. But it was interesting because I got given 2 pieces of antique jewelry, and I remember they were always breaking, and I gave them to my mum to take to the jeweler, and they were from when I was married. And the jeweler's just like, you got to get rid of this. So I gave it back to my ex-husband and said, here, give this to your girlfriend. This doesn't want to be with me anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, they were gifts, and they were from his side of the family. And as soon as we separated, it was like, that piece of jewelry doesn't want to be with me. So it was a real eye-opener to watch your video. So if you're listening to this podcast or watching this video, then Tina Erwin's YouTube channel has got a very interesting video about antique jewelry, and it's going to change the way you look at antiques. It doesn't mean you have to stop buying antique jewelry or antique furniture or antique paintings. You just need to be aware of the energy that is carried with the jewelry. So now we've been talking for an hour. We could speak, I think, for like 7 hours straight, non-stop, you and I, just talking flat. But I want to leave, ask you a question, leave with one thing, and then we'll have to pick up another time. What struck me really the most there was when we talked about people in the coma, and obviously the suicide is another, you know, we have lots of people in hospitals who have tried to commit suicide. Wouldn't it be wonderful if nurses and counsellors were trained to help people? And there must be plenty of people who haunt hospitals.
Oh, I can do a dissertation on that.
Yeah, I thought you might.
We were redoing a wing of a hospital in San Diego, and I happened to know a couple of the nurses, and they took crossing over prayer cards, and they had them built into the walls. Wow. And there was one particular room where every child that was taken to that room came out with a respiratory infection, because, you know, remote viewing it, there was a child who died of a respiratory infection, and he didn't know he was dead. And so he kept trying to play with the kids who were in there. Once he was over, that issue didn't happen anymore. So they started putting these cards in walls.
Wow.
And, I do have in the Crossing Over Prayer book, and I am shamelessly promoting this book mainly because it has prayers for someone who has committed suicide, how to cross a person who has taken their own life specifically, how to send prayers to that family. Someone says, I'll pray for you. What prayer are you using? Mm-hmm. Can you make it specific? And and the prayer that the family can say for the person who has died. I have 88 prayers that are extremely specific for various events: murder, human trafficking, suicide, death of a child, catastrophic. There's so many that, you have something that you can, it's a tool book for spiritual workers and hospital workers everywhere that you can use to help them. Children, babies, no idea what to do when death comes. They're looking for someone to tell them. So my niece died when she was 6. She sat next to my sister and said, "Gee, Mommy, I feel hot," and she died. And I realized that, and I crossed her over, but my frequency dropped because I was in shock and grief that she died so suddenly. This was a long time ago. And my brother had to help me cross her over. So when you have a sudden death, or you have a catastrophe, or you have a death that's expected, they're all unique events for the person and the people and the families involved. And everything that you do that assists them is spiritual service. And I'll kind of wrap this up. There was a great master who was asked, what is your final incarnation? Do you sit on a mountaintop in Tibet? And he said, "No, you're a housewife in Peoria. Do you know how much spiritual service is required to be a wife and a mother or a grandmother and a neighbor and a friend? To do all those things with the goodness in your heart is enormous spiritual progress. Day after day after day. That is, those are the souls in the trenches. They are to be celebrated and appreciated. The guy who goes to work every day, all of those people. So, I have to tell you, it is a true pleasure to be on your show, and I am so grateful. If I could leave all of your listeners with one thing, and that is, use the Crossing Over Prayer on tinaerwin.com or ghosthelpers.com, or on Amazon. There's the Crossing Over Prayer book, and it's also on Amazon Australia, because I sell a lot of books in Australia. And in that book, you will find the tools to help the dead. You don't have to hire a medium. You can do this yourself. It's a tool book for spiritual freedom.
Thank you, Tina.
Amazing job, and you're doing huge spiritual service by the messages you're sending out. So thank you. From my side of the pond here.
Thank you. And I can vouch that prayer does work. So I've had success myself. So thank you. We have had a great chat. You have answered your own question that I was about to say, which was, how can people get in touch with you? So tinaerwin.com and ghosthelpers.com. You have great videos on your YouTube channel, and you also have your own podcast. So what's the name of your podcast?
It's the Ghost Helpers podcast, but I haven't done it in a while because I moved, and it takes a while moving from Southern California, from San Diego to Washington State, where 1,500 feet from the Canadian border was a lot of change. So one end of the other. That's
all right, because the way that I see my podcast, for example, is it's a legacy to my future self. So I don't want my podcast episodes to be out of date. As far as I'm concerned, they all are a complete life lesson in themselves. And so I assume every episode on your podcast is the same. It doesn't matter where you are in time. You can go back to any of those episodes on your podcast and learn something valuable from that episode. So it doesn't matter if it's episode 1 or 202. You can go back at any stage and listen to those, and they are all pertinent to you right there and then.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to describe that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to end this interview there, and thank you to everybody for watching our first YouTube podcast at the same time that it's going to be launching on our audio podcast as well. So thank you, Tina, for your service to humanity and to ghosts and spirits of all kind, and we can't wait to hear from you again. Do yourself a favor, go and get a copy of the prayer, bookmark it in your YouTube playlist, and if you need help, reach out to Tina, and she will be able to guide you to the correct prayer that you might need at any time. All right, thank you. Just going to press pause.